Hi, this is Chris from the Dreamer's Ed podcast.
Did you just say Dreamer's Ed?
Yeah,
I'm learning to dream is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
By the end of this revisiting of Greek myths, we will be fully dreaming. We're going to be talking about Clash of the Titans. Really, this is a story that goes back to the 80s. Even further, it goes back to the Greek myths.
Before going to the Greek myth, it passed by Star Wars.
This is true. But it's got horses with wings for women, and it's got Gemma Arterton for the men.
So this version has Perseus as this fisherman whose parents are killed by the war between man and God, because man has suddenly turned atheist, essentially, and the gods are pretty pissed off about it. Perseus discovers that he has a godlike lineage, and he goes into a quest, because the gods are about to release the Kraken. Yeah.
Which is another part of the mishmash of the whole story, because that's from Norse mythology, not Greek. But, it's at least true to the 80s original. I went to the movie, though, and I was disappointed from the opening sequence. I'm not a big fan of Sam Worthington. I don't know when or how he became this demigod of stars. But here he is again, and he's just as wooden and just as stiff.
Is he a demigod of stars, or is he just a demi-actor?
I guess if you think about, there's Britain, and then there's the States, and then there's Australia in the middle. So he's demi-something, but, this is at least where we're pulling our big stars from. Is he a replacement for Russell Crowe? I don't think so.
I want to see your globe where you have Australia in the middle of the United States and Britain.
Oh, it's there.
No, the story itself, though, like you said, it's basically man versus God. God gets angry. The god in question here, Zeus, being played by
Liam Neeson.
Liam Neeson, not the first time he's played a godlike character. He's got the voice for it, but the movie itself, a couple interesting action sequences, but I found each of them were quite rushed. And even when we're comparing it to other movies that we've been seeing, the CG at least took me out of the movie more than my memory anyway of, the 3D claymation of the original Clash of the Titans. I found the CG a step below what we've come to expect.
I agree. Although, comparing it to the Ray Harryhausen claymation, I think it's a little bit unfair because I think even the best of CGI today doesn't match what Ray Harryhausen could do.
What could have been a good spot for it would have been the Medusa character. At least CG does have a weightlessness, so you could at least see the coils of a snake better than maybe, we would have previously, you know what I mean? But even then, it wasn't on the same plane, it was floating out there, it was too quick, it looked like it was happening on a different level of existence, and you could argue that makes sense when you're talking about gods and men, but when you're watching it on the screen, it just takes you out completely. I found the CG on that level, if we're talking about Medusas, was actually better in Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief.
No, I agree. I mean, it's just, it's my feeling about CGI in general that it doesn't match claymation yet because there's a certain aspect of randomness in claymation that feels more alive to me than CGI. But yeah, I agree with you. The CGI was just inferior to what we've come to expect today.
And this is La Ferrière who directed this one, right?
Is it Leterrier?
Or Leterrier, sorry.
Yeah.
So it's the same person who brought us The Incredible Hulk, right?
Yeah.
And which, again, the one thing that took me out of that movie wasn't Edward Norton's performance, as much as I like Eric Bana a lot better. It was actually the CG.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's actually the people he's working with or just his ability to direct.
It's hard to tell with Leterrier because he doesn't actually direct anymore, He sort of just sits back and lets the producers do whatever.
Yeah, he's kind of called in after the fact to kind of fix a project that's kind of gone off the rails or something.
Yeah. I mean, looking at his early movies, I'm actually moderately interested in what he has to offer in terms of action cinema especially. He has a certain dynamic about his early work that everything spells out somebody that could be interesting in a popcorn level, but ever since he hooked up with Hollywood and divorced himself from the Luc Besson crowd, he's been very boring. And he's never gone back, right? Some go back and forth, but he's moved over to Hollywood. He's become the Hollywood go-to director and brings in the money. You know what I mean? He's at least dependable. He doesn't drop the ball, but I was surprised it did as well as it did, despite the fact that it got a lot of really bad press because of the retrofit 3D. I watched it in 2D, but I hear that 3D was really, really poor. And I can imagine because when you're looking at these scenes of the Greek gods, they've already got these halos around them. Their armor is shining. And you're squinting. I can just imagine it just blur completely. That's exactly what happened because the CGI was mostly focused on the gods and not the creatures, which I think was a mistake. I think giant scorpion, I want to see that in 3D. Kraken, I want to see more 3D on it than they gave us. But they gave us a lot of 3D on Liam Neeson and his like floating hair,
Yeah.
and it looked like he had an oven behind him, and like the air was like moving. It was really weird and off-putting, and it kicked me out of the movie even more. You know.
These scenes that we're talking about, like, it's just them staring at each other across, obviously, a green screen, you know, and then it just gets peopled in with, like, a very white space, you know, so it's just like, why not just put them in a white room? Who cares, you know? And then you got Ray Fiennes with his black toenails and his black nail polish and his raggedy clothes, speaking in such a overwrought, whispery voice of evil. And then you've got Liam Neeson with his, like, from on high godliness, you know? Beating down on him, and they're just like they're kind of speaking at each other. It's just like it's a weird.
But you don't realize it's Aslan speaking to Voldemort.
But exactly, and I feel like they're the only ones who actually had a tinge of at least, okay, we're here for the paycheck, and this is kind of fun.
Well, for me, I remember quite fondly the original movie. This is one of the first movies that my parents rented when we actually got a VHS. And I remember liking it a lot. And what I liked also was kind of like the bickering between the gods. It was like Hera herself that was really lashing out at Perseus because, he's the son of Zeus. And, you know, here's this wife that's being brought forward like his infidelity and here's the bastard son and gonna get these bastard son and everything else. And when I saw the movie and the whole thing with the atheist, now the new movie with Sam Worthington, I couldn't care less about like whether people were praying to the gods and everything. I kind of like this idea of these towering gods bickering among themselves and who pays, like it's the low people on the chain. And just thematically, that was the problem for the new movie. And then, lo and behold, like all the rest, Sam Worthington has basically a lightsaber, and the way they tried to jazz it up, I didn't like it. Didn't like it at all.
You mentioned the gods towering up there, and I guess I'll jump on that for a sec, just because it's true. Like what this movie has, as much as it tries to give it to you with the halos and everything, it's like it lacks scale. That at least I remember when I was a kid, where the gods were larger and more imposing than the humans. You know, this one, they keep coming down to Earth, which, you know, granted this is, you know, a trope of Greek mythology, but they don't feel like they're quite interacting properly. You know, are they a part of the story or not? You know, and the Perseus story that I like, I guess, in my mind, you know, I liken to almost an Odysseus story, where he's thinking his way through several layers, and, you know, it's almost like a video game. You know, it's like, you know, you get to this stage, and you have to think through this, and you got to do that, and you got to do this, and you got to do that, and you get to that level, and then you cut off the Medusa's head, and you go here. Spoiler, I'm sorry. Yeah. Now, with this one, he's pushed towards it. The only time he actually gets forward is when he, you know, kind of basically assumes his lordliness at a certain level, and then the movie kind of finishes. You know, it's just like you don't really feel a soaring of spirit for his character in any way. As much as this one tries to put on a layer of human frailty because, you know, we're talking about atheism, this and that, there isn't a sense of human triumph, is my point.
What I come to realize is that American culture, as currently interpreted by Hollywood especially, but just in general, it really clashes with Greek myth, because Greek myth is all about how man is subject to fate no matter how hard they fight it, because life events are just larger. That's the large lesson you're supposed to get from most Greek myth. And of course that goes against the American spirit, where like self-made man is like triumph over everything, the human spirit.
And then you get the prize at the end.
Yeah, American Idol, all of that, exactly.
Mind you, and you see this a lot in Homer. It comes out of the idea of what a hero is, you know, but it's just like there could be a moment where I guess you've kind of become the center of everything. And there's a specific Greek word for it, and I can't remember at this moment, but it's just basically there could be a battle of 2,000, 3,000, a million, and it doesn't matter. The moment that you're having is so awesome that suddenly almost everyone's aware of it. If anything speaks to American mentality, is this sense of ownership of the moment and this ability to like make of everything this one triumphant moment, even if you die afterwards.
I agree with that, and I think that's why the original Clash of the Titans still worked.
Exactly.
But I think Hollywood, as it currently interprets American culture, is the thing. It's no longer everybody's going to get their 15 minutes of fame. It's the 15 minutes. It could always be yours now. You know what I mean?
But even like, you know, the way that he's like, I want to be a simple fisherman and everything else, and then you get Zeus that just comes in and it's like, I'm going to give you the car, I'm going to give you the girl, I'm going to give you the house, I'm going to give you like everything that is interpreted as the American dream. And it's like, really, can't be that he's gonna have a simple life. Oh, no, can't have that.
No.
And, yeah. But that's the part that bothers me.
But yeah, it goes against the story. It's really weird.
Yeah.
It's a weird mishmash, and it creates the effect that you were talking about, Chris, where at the end you feel completely disconnected from his achievements because things were given to him, and he didn't want them at first, and then he realized that he is American, so he takes them.
Exactly.
You know?
The one achievement of the film that I took away and I kind of liked was just you're built up from the trailers onward with this idea of the release of the Kraken, and when it does release, it is a beast that is so big that you can't really fight. It twitches a thumb and buildings topple, and it shrugs and a mountain trembles, and it's quite awe-inspiring, like the scope of what they've done with it, but then it's over. Don't worry, we've got the magic bullet, and it's just like I'm with it, I want to be with it, and then the rug gets kind of pulled out from underneath me, and it's just like, and I'm left kind of thinking, where are you taking me?
Yeah, the pacing is a huge problem, and
yeah, absolutely.
And it reminded me of Star Wars Episode 1, actually. The way I saw it and the way I understood the problems were really in relation to what George Lucas said in his commentary track from Episode 1, where he said, I was trying to build an Odyssey, and then I streamlined the story because, good storytelling goes from point A to point B at the most economical pace possible. And I'm listening to that commentary track, and I'm like, no, that's the opposite of an Odyssey. Odyssey goes from point A to point B, taking the scenic route.
Yeah,
that's what defines it.
You sing a couple of songs around the bonfire, and
Yeah, and you go through every possible obstacle imaginable, and that's what makes it an Odyssey. And I find that's what happened, where they set up a couple of set pieces like an Odyssey, and they sped through them as fast as possible in such a way that it doesn't even make sense near the end, where he goes to hell, where the Medusa is, and he's like, wait, what? Why would any of the Gorgons be in hell?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even in questions, again, some of the things they actually do linger on, because there is a moment where they actually have to hike for quite a while. They end up hiking on the backs of these giant scorpions, and
they don't look that mobile.
Well, by that point, they've spent so much time with these giant scorpions that I'm kind of bored of them as an idea. Like I've seen one, the other one's bigger, then the third one's even bigger, and you're like, I'm getting bored. But then they actually ride them, so it's just kind of like, well, it's a bunch of insects crawling around on the back, and it's just it's.
And they're crawling up the mountain, and they constantly slip, and you're like wow, this is
there's
efficient.
nothing really kind of measure the speed or the distance against because it's just another dune, So it's just like you're like, at least let me linger on this, and you're not even letting me.
But also, they come out of the cave, and then you get this feeling like, ooh, we forgot about that character. Okay, fight scene. Here we go. And it finishes so fast, you're like, what just happened? I thought this guy was big and menacing, and then he's taken out within 5 minutes.
So I think we've all agreed we haven't really liked the movie, because they set this up as the beginning of a trilogy. Do you think that's still going to happen?
I don't think so, to be honest. And it's kind of regrettable, because I will say, I actually would like to see a sequel directed by and written by other people. Because we talked about all the things that didn't work. I want to touch upon the things that did work for me. I like the Jin character. He's kind of a completely mystical creature, and the whole idea that he doesn't really have a body anymore. He's just a soul that takes up scratch and makes a body with it whenever he feels like it. It's pretty cool. I want to see more of this guy. He's neat, and he looked badass. He looked like a Frank Miller ninja. And the child
was it in Transformers, the Junkbots, or whatever,
the Junkions.
Yeah, that's it. They would do the exact same thing.
Yeah, and the kid in me thought it was really cool. You know what I mean? And I liked Io an awful lot. She's played by Gemma Arterton as this woman who kind of in a RPG video game. She's the person you come back to, and she nudges you and tells you where to go because you got lost.
Yeah, that's exactly what she was.
Yeah.
She's compass.
And I dug her. She's a total plot device, but she's a very sympathetic and very sexy plot device, and I wouldn't mind seeing her again.
Not much romance, you know what I mean? In terms of chemistry between her and, the love interest, so to speak, but nonetheless, she was a good part of the movie.
Yeah, I find so. Because, her backstory, which I won't get into, is really fun. It's really an interesting backstory. So, it's not all bad, you know what I mean? There are some good ideas there. It's just that they kind of just rush through them and put them all together and mishmash and didn't really think of creating a cohesive whole. But the ideas are there to make a good sequel,
Well, yeah, these are stories as old as time. So it's always disappointing when they kind of mess them up. You know what I mean? Certainly the structure is there, and they could have done something much sounder, I found, and they still could have jazzed it up and made it exciting. I'm not going to talk about, Sam Worthington's buzz cut. How could that have been possible? It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Not everything's going to fit. Like the sword that is basically a lightsaber, Eric's right. It's a little bit silly. You know what I mean? But, if they find a dragon next time, I would still probably go watch it.
I do have
make
to
sense, but...
I do have to say, one of the parts I liked the most was the Pegasus. I like the way that it would fly and kind of run.
That's the one 3D sequence that they made. It was gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the mountains, like, they were in front of each other, and when Pegasus would actually reach that plane, when he would step on the rocks, it was really cool.
Yeah, I found that was a good use of CG, for sure. Obviously a real horse, and then they just added in the wings, and they just blended it nicely and perfectly. It was good.
Ratings then, I guess?
Ratings? All right.
I went in there with low expectations because I don't necessarily mind when they remake movies as long as they do something good with it. So for me, awful. D-.
I'm going to go a bit higher. I'll actually go C-, marginally higher. For me, this was one of the gateway summer blockbusters. I was looking forward to a fun movie, then go have a beer on a terrace afterwards. I was disappointed, though, and it had some problems.
I'm giving it a C. Like I mentioned, there's a couple of things that I really quite like, and I wouldn't mind seeing them in a sequel. But overall,
To go see a film just for winged horses, not
and
really worth it.
IO. IO is hot.